Hello and welcome to the video. In front of you here is two models that I've recently built. One is a little SD cross silhouette Gundam RX78-2 and the other one is the Assault Angels SS01B BEE. Both really excellent little kits. Really did enjoy doing the Assault Angels. Comes with a lot of accessories, but it also comes with quite a few spare parts. Hands, faces, legs, arms, feet, all these kind of bits and pieces, all good kit bashing material. So I was kind of looking at the spare bits and the spare heads that I had left and just thinking what I could do, and then it kind of came to me that I could do a little kit bash with an SD kit and the parts from the Assault Angels B and maybe make up some kind of Cosplay Girl, Gundam Girl type kit bash thing. Just checking the proportions here, and funnily enough, although the SD has got really short legs compared to the B, the body is actually not that far off of the proportion, and the head is about the right size. So here I am just using a big lump of blue tack just to kind of plan out how I'm going to extend the SD kit to make it look a bit more like there was a girl inside there. So you know, spacing out the waist and stuff, just kind of getting an idea of what I'll have to recreate in plastic, just using blue tack, so it's nice and easy to make changes. So there we have a little view of it. It looks like it should kind of work out okay. Do need to do quite a little bit of extra plastic there for the waist, but as you can see there, you've got the outline there of what I'm trying to achieve. I've just stuck the head on with blue tack there as well. So now at the moment I'm taking off the legs. I need to extend the legs. The legs are too short, even though this is a cross silhouette kit which do have quite long legs for an SD. I want to kind of make this look more sort of like there's a girl in there. The problem is the legs on the B or the kit, obviously it's supposed to be a sexy assassin girl, so she's got absolutely ridiculously long legs, which aren't actually human proportions. So I don't have to make the legs that much longer, but I do have to extend them a little bit just to make it a bit more believable as a cosplay thing. So me sticking it back on there, obviously blue tack doesn't hold very well, so I'm just kind of trying to balance it to give you an idea of what it's going to look like when it's finished and what I need to do still. So that's kind of the pose that I'm going to go for. That's the idea. So now I have to take all of these blue tack pieces and now make plastic parts for those, and try and sort of make this look as though it's supposed to exist rather than just a load of plastic stuck together with blue tack. So I've got a few bits and pieces that might help with this kit bash, and one of those things is one of these SD cross silhouette booster packs. This just comes with a few bits and pieces, different hands, but what I'm interested in is the slightly extended leg pieces that I might be able to use instead of making everything from scratch to extend the legs and the arms. So I'm going to have a little look inside this box, see if there's any bits and pieces that are going to be useful to me. Don't know if you're familiar with these booster pack things, but as you can see here, just mainly got sort of connector pieces, so hands, thigh pieces, bicep pieces, but it also comes with extra little bits for making a SD gym. I still haven't collected all these spare parts to actually make a gym out of the SD cross silhouette packs, but maybe I'll get there one day. I'd need to buy a new RX78-2 now because I'm massacring this for this kit bash. I've also got the pink version because I wanted to do bits and pieces to my Zaku. So yeah, here's me basically just kind of working out if the arm pieces and stuff, maybe I can use the extra arm pieces in the cross silhouette pack to make the arms a little bit longer. And I'm going to cut out the hands because I do like the hands in this booster pack. I think they're still going to be a little bit too big for what I want, but they've got a different sort of pose to them, more of a sort of a salute hand, which I do quite like. But having looked at it here on the kit, although it looks quite good on an SD kit, really it doesn't fit with the scale of being a girl's hand, even with a glove on. So I don't know if I'll keep that, but I'm going to have that there for now anyway, just because I like the look of it, but we'll probably change it to something else. Okay, so back over to the legs then. I need to, even with these SD booster pack parts, they're still not going to be long enough, so I'm going to have to build something up. What I'm doing here is basically just using an SD booster piece for the thigh, and then I'm taking the original cross silhouette piece of thigh, which you can see is a bit smaller. I flipped that upside down, stuck that on top, and now it's starting to resemble more of a longer thigh piece. Only problem is I'll have to cut off the top there and make a few other changes, but rather than build a lot of plastic out of, from scratch, I'm using as much chunks from packs and spare bits as I can to just save work basically. But you can see that it's not going to be compatible. One is a peg and one's a a sideways hole thing, so that's not really going to work, but I'll have to make some adjustments. But that's I might even have to elongate this even further with a bit of plastic, but it at least allows me sort of a centimetre's worth of plastic that I won't have to actually build from scratch and shape. So I think if I just drill the hole all the way through this, I mean it's got a hole for a peg on the bottom side. Because it's flipped upside down, I won't be able to use that hole, so I'm going to drill the hole all the way through and get rid of that top piece of the looped bit of plastic. So you can see here, I'm not very good at explaining, but you can see here what I've done. I've cut off that bit of plastic on the top and I've drilled the hole all the way through. So now I'm going to stick that onto the leg with a bit of blue tack in between. So now I can see that it's making more of a good sort of thigh shape. Still not as high as the blue tack the reference piece that I made out of blue tack, so I'm going to have to extend that even further. So looking at the ankles now, I'm trying to use another piece from the SD cross silhouette pack, booster pack, just to see if I can use one of the ankle pieces in between the shin to make the foot a little bit longer. Only problem is obviously double ball joint, which so I'm going to have to saw a little bit off and glue it, which is what I'm doing here. I've just kind of sawed the top ball joint part off because I only wanted to use the bottom bit. And then I'm actually going to glue that to the ankle. That doesn't make much sense until you actually see up close what it is that I'm doing. So anyway, it'll make much more sense once it's all done and I can show you properly. But right now, while those little ankle pieces are drying, I'm going to carry on working on the legs. And what I'm doing here, I'm just cutting up some pieces of 5mm plastic plate. Just cutting some strips off that I'm going to glue together to sandwich glue, and then that's going to give me my extension for the leg pieces. So I'm just taking the thigh piece that I've made so far and sort of going to glue that down to a plastic piece, and then when that's dry, glue that plastic piece to another plastic piece, and so on until I've sandwiched them all together so I've actually got some thickness, and then I can sand that down and it'll all become the same piece of thigh plastic. Hopefully that's the plan. Okay, so here I'm just gluing the grey piece to the top of the white plastic sandwich pieces that I've just made, and once that's connected to the top and then dry, it comes out looking something a little bit like this. So as you can see, the white bit at the bottom, that's the original sort of thigh piece from the booster pack, and then I extended it with the plastic and then glued the grey piece at the top. And what I'm going to do here is just add a bit of putty just all around smear putty all around the outside of the thigh, just to cover up any deep sort of little pits and stuff like that. And I'm going to sand that back down, and hopefully should have a piece of thigh that is all nice and straight. Obviously right now it looks a bit weird being in different colours, but we'll paint it before we're finished, so it'll all look right in the end. Right, so here you can see one leg compared to the other, with the blue tack, so you can see that I'm getting to the right sort of length now with the leg extensions that I've made. So putting it back onto the model just to get more of an idea of how it's going to look like all together. And now I'm going to be moving on to basically elongating the waist and making that section. So the same way that I did the thigh extension, just going to be cutting out pieces of pla plate and then gluing those to the original plastic piece, and then using sanding sticks and clippers to basically shape it how I want it. There's no sort of right or wrong way to doing it. It's just glue and shape until you're happy with it. If you're not happy with it, take it all apart and start again. So here it's starting. You can see I've got a couple of layers now, and once they've been glued tightly and sanded, they're starting to look like one part. I'm just kind of continuously testing it and comparing it to the blue tack to get the right sort of depth. So another couple of bits of plastic need to be glued together. I think to make up this waist section, I end up using quite a few little sheets of plastic. But there you can see we're starting to get some good depth going on there. I looked into my other spare parts and there wasn't anything that I could really use to boost the stomach up a little bit. So I did just have to keep building it up half a mil or half a centimetre, a few mil every time. I had to keep building it up by a few mil every time. So you can see now that I've shaped the waist a little bit, giving it more of a sort of a woman's body. Now I'll move on to the thigh pieces, because where the SD sort of thighs are quite wide, so there's a lot of undercarriage gap, shall we say. So what I'm doing here is I'm just sanding down the ball joint to about halfway, so that I've still got the width of the ball joint for the hip, but the hip piece actually goes on a lot closer to the center, if that makes any sense. So just sanding down that ball joint only about halfway, because I still want the same amount of width, because I still want the cap to pop on. So as the cap pops on there, you can see that it's actually you know, the width apart has been shrunk down drastically, and the legs are much closer together now, which makes it more sort of realistic. So talking of making things a little bit more realistic, I wasn't too happy with the thighs, or the hips rather, because on the SD kit they're just basically polycaps, so they don't look like actual human legs in any way. So I used a bit of epoxy putty to just kind of mould around the polycaps, just to give them a rounded sort of hip-like appearance. So hopefully that I can then blend that with the rest of the leg, just to make it look a bit more realistic. So while I'm waiting for those thigh pieces to dry before I sand them down and shape them, I'm going to start working on the head. So unfortunately the head from the Assault Angel doesn't quite fit onto the ball joint for the SD kit. It's close but no cigar, so there's going to be a little bit of modification needed there. But luckily I think just by sanding down the ball joint to get it a little bit smaller, it will pop in there quite easily, I think. At this point here I kind of realised that maybe I'd actually got the ball joint mechanism back to front in the SD kit, so realised I might have to change that around later. But for now I'm just going to sand down the ball joint to make it a little bit smaller, so that the head actually does fit in there. So just taking off a little bit at a time and then testing it, and then take off a little bit more if necessary, and eventually the head does pop on, and it fits not too shabbily. Right, so moving on now, the other thing that needs a bit of attention is the arms and the shoulder gap. If I plug in the arm back into the model here, you can see there's quite a big sort of shoulder gap, which doesn't look like as the human's arm inside there. So what I want to do is I want to kind of shrink this gap down to get the whole arm closer to the body, so that it looks realistic, like that girl's arm is actually inside the a costume basically. So in a similar way to how I was working on the thighs and the hip joints, I'm going to shorten down the peg, or the ball joint. I don't know, it's kind of a peg, it's kind of a ball joint, but I'm going to shorten down the peg on these shoulders by chopping it off as flush as I can to the part, so that I've got the entire length of that peg. Sand it down so that it's nice and flush, so that I've I've got a flat edge to work on. And now at this point I'm drilling a hole into that shoulder piece that's the same width as the peg that I've just cut off. Because if I just glue the peg, if I shorten the peg and glue it back on flat, then there's not going to be a lot of strength there. So what I'm doing is I'm making this hole to essentially sink that peg inside it and then glue it inside to give it the extra strength. So then what I'm doing is I don't need to cut any peg off, I'm just pushing that peg deeper into the shoulder joint, if that makes sense. So it's the same length, but I've cut the hole and then sort of inserted it into it to bring the length, make it shorter. And then once that's glued around the outside, around the edge, then it's going to be a much stronger joint than if I'd have just glued it onto the piece, a flush join. So this gives it that added strength. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to be working on this video for the time being is going to be the hands. Now, I originally was using these SD expansion pack hands. I like the look of them. They've got kind of a Mickey Mouse comic book sort of vibe to them, but they are just too big. They're not in proportion. So I've got this little bag of high grade parts. I think this was from, what was this from? A high grade gym, type C, I think. It came with some spare hands. Now these hands are a lot more dainty, look a bit more like a girl's hands than the giant Mickey Mouse hands, so I think I'm going to use these instead. The only problem being that the ball joint for the hands onto the wrist is going to be different. The SD kit's got a much larger ball joint and the HG hand just isn't going to stick in there. So what I need to do is I need to actually now make this ball joint bigger, whereas I've been making ball joints smaller this whole time. So I've got to make this ball joint bigger, and the way that I'm going to do that is just by building up layers of glue on top of those ball joints. So pretty simple. I'm just going to stick the hands into some blue tack, paint some glue onto the ball joint, let that dry, paint another layer on until I've finally built up enough layers that the ball joint is big enough that it's actually going to seat properly into the wrist joint. So that's what I'm going to be working on and finishing off for the time being. Hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a thumbs up. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. I'm going to be doing another part to this, obviously. Keep you updated with how this Kitbash is going, and I'm going to be producing a lot of other videos coming soon. So do subscribe if you are interested in that kind of thing, and I'll catch you on the next one.